standing strong and tall. Yeah, this is the Bullvine, coming on the air, sharing the stories of the folks who care. Profiles of passion, voices of the trade, dairy strong legends being made. Yeah, this is the Bullvine, coming on the air, sharing the stories of the folks who care. Profiles of passion, voices of the trade.
Welcome to the Bullvine podcast, where we dive deep into the stories that shape dairy farming. I'm your host, and today we're bringing you something different, something powerful. You're about to experience a story that will challenge everything you think you know about survival in agriculture. It's about an empire built from nothing, destroyed by forces beyond anyone's control, and rebuilt into something nobody saw coming. This is the Nipponia story, the story of Ken Kurosawatsu, who arrived in Canada in the 1960s, unable to speak English but with an extraordinary eye for cattle. The story of his son Ken, who watched 40 years of breeding excellence get auctioned off in a single morning, and the story of how losing everything became the foundation for something greater. Over the next 75 minutes, you'll stand in auction barns with security guards at the doors. You'll witness breeding decisions that created all Canadian champions. You'll feel the crushing weight of BSE closing borders overnight. And you'll discover why your survival in dairy might depend on building something completely opposite to what you're doing now. This isn't just history. This is a blueprint for navigating the challenges you're facing right now in 2025. Rising costs, consolidation pressure, market volatility. The lessons from Nipponia aren't just relevant, they're essential. So settle in, turn up the volume, and prepare to experience one of the most important stories in modern dairy history. Because what happened to the Kurosawatsu family isn't unique. It's happening right now across North America to operations just like yours. The only difference? They found a way through. And by the end of this episode, you'll understand how. This is the Bullvine podcast.
You stand at the back of Brubacher's auction barn on a sweltering July morning in 2009. The humidity makes your shirt stick to your back before the first lot even enters the ring. But the heat isn't what's making you uncomfortable. It's the security guards. You count them, 1, 2, 3. 6 guards positioned at every entrance, at a Holstein dispersal sale. You've been to hundreds of these sales over the years, watched countless operations fold, but you've never seen anything like this. The tension in the air is thick enough to cut with a knife. You recognize Ken Kurosawatsu standing near the sale ring, his face a mask of controlled emotion. His childhood friend Kevin Hayden stays close, not here to bid, but to watch Ken's back. The whispers in the crowd tell you why. Creditors have made threats, real threats, the kind that make a man hire security for his own cattle sale. The auctioneer's voice booms across the barn. Ladies and gentlemen, lot number 47, we have Penlo Georgette outside, one of the finest Holstein cows to ever grace a show ring. You watch her enter, magnificent even now, even here. She's the crown jewel of what was once a global Holstein empire. All-Canadian senior 3-year-old in 2004. Later, all-Canadian mature cow in 2007. The kind of animal that makes other breeders stop mid-conversation when she walks past. But she's here, in this ring, about to be sold to the highest bidder, along with everything else Ken's father spent 40 years building. You're witnessing the end of Nipponia Holsteins, an operation that exported genetics to Japan and Brazil, that produced 3 all-Canadian bulls from a single cow, that reportedly changed veterinary law in Ontario through a landmark malpractice case. An empire built by a man who arrived in Canada unable to speak English, who started with nothing but an extraordinary eye for cattle. What you don't know yet, what nobody in this barn knows, is that this isn't really an ending. It's a beginning. The complete destruction you're witnessing will become the foundation for something nobody saw coming. Something that challenges everything you thought you knew about survival in agriculture. But to understand how we got here, to understand why security guards are necessary at a dairy cattle sale, you need to go back. Back to 1968. Back to a barn in Ontario, where a young Japanese man who couldn't speak a word of English was about to change the Holstein industry forever. You're standing in a tie stall barn in southern Ontario in 1968. The sun hasn't come up yet, but you're already on your third cup of coffee, watching your breath fog in the cold morning air. The radio in the milk house crackles with news about Vietnam, about Pierre Trudeau's rise to power, about social upheaval in cities you'll probably never visit. But here in the barn, life moves to different rhythms. The twice-daily milking, the seasonal cycles of planting and harvest, the careful breeding decisions that won't show results for 3 years. You're part of something bigger happening in Ontario agriculture right now, though you might not fully realize it yet. This province is becoming the epicenter of the global Holstein revolution. Down the road, Romandale Farms under Murray Hunt and Dave Houck is setting production records that seem impossible. Cows pushing past 20,000 pounds of milk in a lactation when 12,000 was considered exceptional just a decade ago. The Roman brothers, Stephen and George, are pouring uranium mining money into Holstein genetics, transforming the industry. The infrastructure is transforming too. United Breeders, which will later become part of GenCore and eventually EastGen, is expanding their artificial insemination services throughout Ontario. You remember when AI was considered radical, almost unnatural. Now, frozen semen from proven bulls is changing bloodlines faster than anyone imagined possible. You can breed your cow to a bull that's been dead for 5 years, to genetics from halfway around the world. Brubacher's has become a major venue for selling registered cattle in the Waterloo region. It's not like the old country auctions where you sold your cull cows for beef money. These are sophisticated sales, designed specifically for registered cattle, pulling buyers from across North America, even overseas. You flip through the latest Holstein journal while waiting for the milk truck. The pages are full of cows with names like Romandale, Reflection Sovereign, Hanover Hill Barb, Glenridge, Citation Roxy. These aren't just animals anymore. They're genetic investments, worth more than your grandfather's entire farm. The money flowing into registered Holsteins is staggering. You hear stories, some verified, some exaggerated, of single cows selling for tens of thousands of dollars, enough to buy multiple farms in your county. Japanese buyers are showing up at sales with significant capital. Brazilian delegations tour farms looking for genetics to transform their tropical dairy industry. But there's another change happening that you sense more than see. The old way of farming, the family operation passed down through generations, the diversified farm with a bit of everything, it's giving way to something else. Specialization, scale, science. You're tracking feed conversions now, calculating the protein percentage needed for optimal production. You know your cow's genetic indexes, their predicted transmitting abilities. The margin for error keeps shrinking. One wrong breeding decision, one bad investment in the wrong bloodline, and you could be finished. It's into this world of opportunity and risk that a wave of new immigrants is arriving. Post-war Canada needs workers, needs farmers, needs people willing to do the jobs that prosperity has made less attractive to those born here. The Immigration Act of 1967 just introduced a points system, education, language skills, job prospects. But there's still room for those with specialized skills, even if they can't speak English. And in the barn at 5 a.m., when you're pulling a calf or treating mastitis, language barriers matter less than knowing what you're doing. Japanese immigration to Canada has been complicated since the war. The internment camps, the dispersal policy that scattered Japanese Canadians across the country, the gradual rehabilitation. But by 1967, things are changing. Japan's economy is booming. They call it the economic miracle. And Japanese businesses are looking for opportunities abroad. Some come as students, some as technical workers, and some, like the man whose story you're about to experience, come with skills that transcend language, an ability to see potential in an animal that others miss, to develop that potential through management and breeding, to build something from nothing. You don't know it yet, standing in your barn this morning in 1968, but the registered Holstein business is about to become as volatile as any commodity market. The same forces that are creating millionaires will destroy others. Export markets will open and slam shut. Diseases will emerge that nobody's heard of yet. Partnerships will form and explode. And for one family, the journey from nothing to empire to complete destruction will become a roadmap for survival that challenges everything you think you know about staying in business. You're lying in a narrow bunk on a cargo ship somewhere in the Pacific Ocean in the mid-1960s. The engines throb through the metal walls, a constant vibration that's become part of your body's rhythm after 2 weeks at sea. You're in your 20s, and you're leaving everything you've ever known. Your name is Yukio Kurosawatsu, though soon enough, Canadian farmers will struggle to pronounce it, will shorten it to Yuk, or just point when they need you. You don't mind. Where you're going, your name matters less than what you can do. You think about the farm you left behind in Japan, north of Tokyo. Generations of farming, your father's weathered hands teaching you to read the weather, to understand the soil. But Japan is changing. The economy is modernizing, industrializing. Small farms like yours are being swallowed by development. Your brothers will stay, will fight to keep the land. But you've chosen a different path. You've heard about Canada from others who've gone before. Vast spaces, opportunity, farms bigger than entire villages back home, and cattle, not the Wagyu beef cattle of Japan, but dairy cattle, Holsteins, black and white machines that produce rivers of milk. You know cattle, not Holsteins specifically, but you understand animals in a way that goes beyond language. It's in how they move, how they stand, the look in their eyes. Your grandfather taught you this, made you sit silent in the barn for hours, just watching, learning to see what others miss. The immigration officer in Toronto speaks slowly, but it doesn't help. You understand maybe one word in 10. You show him your papers, the address of the farm where you have work arranged. He stamps something, points toward a door. You bow, a habit that will take years to break. Your first jobs are tough, vegetable farms, manual labor, whatever you can find. You're working alongside other immigrants, Portuguese, Italian, Caribbean. The work is brutal, bent over in the fields from dawn to dusk. Your back screams, your hands blister and callous, but you save every penny, learning English from children's books you find in church donation bins. After a few years of hard work, you hear about opportunities on dairy farms. The Agro brothers, Angelo and Frank, need someone reliable, someone who won't complain about the hours, the smell, the endless routine of twice daily milking. You're standing in Angelo Agro's barn for what feels like a job interview, though it's more of an assessment. He's a big man, loud, used to being obeyed. He shows you around, talking fast in English you can barely follow, but you understand the important parts. These are good cows, very good cows. Registered Holsteins with papers going back generations. You watch how Angelo handles them, efficient but rough, focused on production. You see a heifer in the corner, her udder uneven, her front legs slightly out of position. Without thinking, you walk over, run your hands along her back, down her legs. You see potential where Angelo sees a problem. Angelo watches you work for a few minutes, then laughs, a booming sound that echoes off the barn walls. According to those who knew him, he had a way of testing new workers, teasing them constantly. Him no good, he'd reportedly say, poking workers in the chest whenever they made mistakes. But there was affection in it when he saw talent. The work is hard but familiar. You're up at 4:30, in the barn by 5, milking, feeding, cleaning. The other workers, local kids mostly, complain constantly. The smell, the hours, the pay. But for you, this is opportunity. You study the cows obsessively, not just their production records, which Angelo tracks religiously, but their conformation, their movement, their breeding. You borrow Holstein magazines from the milk house, struggling through the English with a dictionary, learning the bloodlines, sovereign, reflection, citation. You're sitting in your boarding house room in Guelph, counting money. After working with the Agros, you have several $1,000s saved, a significant sum by your standards, though not nearly enough by Canadian farming standards. You know you need more. You need a partner. That's when you meet Tom Ikeda at a Japanese community dinner. Tom's been in Canada for several years, working at Shaver Poultry as a chick sexer. The work involves sorting male from female chicks at incredible speed, a specialized skill that commands high wages. The work is destroying his eyes, staring through magnifying glasses at thousands of chicks every day, but the pay is extraordinary for the era. You explain your vision to Tom in Japanese, relief flooding through you at being able to express complex ideas again. You've been watching, learning. You know which bloodlines are producing. You know which cows the established breeders undervalue. With capital, with the right animals, you could build something. Tom listens, his eyes already strained behind thick glasses. He knows his career has maybe a few more years before his eyes give out completely. He needs something else, something for the future. The partnership terms are negotiated. Tom provides the initial capital, you choose the cattle, and manage operations. The exact financial arrangements, like many business details from this era, remain private between the parties involved. But already, you're seeing further ahead than Tom realizes. You're not just thinking about buying and selling cattle. You're thinking about Japan, about the growing wealth there, about the demand for Western agricultural genetics. You're thinking about Brazil, where Japanese immigrants have built successful farming operations. You're thinking about building something that will last beyond you, something your sons, if you ever have sons, can inherit. An empire built not on land, which can be taken away, but on knowledge and genetics, which travel across oceans. What you don't know yet, standing in that boarding house room with your savings and your dreams, is that your inability to speak English, what everyone sees as your greatest weakness, will become a strength. It will force you to communicate through your work, through results that speak louder than words. It will make you listen more carefully, observe more closely. And when the partnerships fail, when the markets collapse, when everything you build seems to crumble, that same silence will teach your son lessons about resilience that no amount of talking could convey. You're sitting in lawyer Ted Morwick's office in downtown Guelph, Tom Ikeda beside you. Morwick is explaining the partnership agreement, speaking slowly, using simple words when he looks at you. You understand more than he thinks, but you let Tom translate anyway. The structure is straightforward, a registered partnership. Tom provides the initial capital investment. You contribute your expertise and labor. All decisions require both signatures, but practically speaking, Tom handles the money, you handle the cattle. You sign your name carefully in English letters, still awkward after several years in Canada, but your signature on a cattle registration paper, that's what matters. Your first major purchase comes soon after. The Agros are selling AgroAcres Royal Master Nell. She's nothing special to look at. Decent mammary system, but weak fore-udder attachments, legs that toe out slightly. Angelo practically dismisses her value when you express interest. You see what Angelo doesn't, or maybe what he doesn't have time to develop. Nell has the bloodlines, generations of very good and excellent dams. More importantly, she has the frame to carry improvement. With the right management, the right feeding program, you can transform her. You move Nell to a rented facility outside Guelph, just a few stalls in an old bank barn, but it's yours to manage. You start what you call a real udder job on her. Specific feeding to tighten those attachments. Careful trimming to correct her stance. Daily attention to improve her condition. Tom visits after the first week. He looks at the time you're spending on one cow and shakes his head. In the time you've spent on Nell, he's processed thousands of chicks at the hatchery, earning significant wages. You try to explain, this isn't about immediate milk production. It's about genetic potential, about what her offspring could become. But Tom's focus is on immediate returns. The breeding decision for Nell takes you weeks to finalize. You study every available bull, comparing genetic indexes, looking at daughter performance. Finally, you settle on Glenvale Ideal Fury Reflector. He's not the highest indexing bull, not the most popular, but his strengths complement Nell's weaknesses perfectly. 9 months later, you're pulling Nell's calf at 2 a.m. in March, the barn so cold your breath fogs as you work. It's a bull calf, strong, perfectly marked. Within weeks, you know you have something special. The way he moves, his natural width, the straightness of his legs, everything Nell lacked, this calf has. A buyer from Colombia sees the calf at a few months old. The offer is substantial, thousands of dollars for an animal from a cow others had dismissed. After expenses, you've made more than many farmers make in a year. But you're already thinking ahead. If Nell can produce this quality to Fury once, she can do it again. You breed her back immediately, same mating. The problems with Tom start small. He arrives at the barn unannounced, wanting to check on his investment. You're in the middle of treating a heifer for mastitis, hands covered in antiseptic, and Tom's asking about feed costs, about why you need such expensive mineral supplements. You try to explain through gestures and broken English that cheap feed makes cheap cattle, that the difference between good and great is often just management. But Tom's looking at spreadsheets, at daily costs to maintain animals. The partnership dissolution comes approximately 1 year after it started. You're sitting at Tom's kitchen table, Ted Morwick between you with papers spread out. Tom's made his decision. He wants out. The long hours at the hatchery are taking their toll. His eyesight is deteriorating, and watching his investment in cattle he doesn't understand is adding stress he doesn't need. Morwick explains the terms. Tom recovers his initial investment with interest. You keep the cattle and can continue using the business name. There's a non-compete clause. Neither can operate a similar business within the region for several years. Tom suddenly looks concerned. Does this mean I can never own another cow? According to accounts of the meeting, Morwick laughed gently. Tom, you can get around that. Just put them in your wife's name. All three of you laugh, but you're already thinking ahead. You have several good females now, including Nell, who's produced exceptional offspring to Fury. You have capital in the bank, no partner to answer to. What follows is a streak of breeding success that establishes your reputation. Nell's subsequent Fury sons reportedly all achieve significant success, with 3 becoming all-Canadian nominated bulls, a remarkable achievement from a single cow. You acquire Picklin Texel Ellen at a major sale, investing heavily. But Ellen, bred to leading sires, produces exceptional offspring, daughters that classify excellent and very good, each one worth more than you paid for the dam. Claude Pickett at Pickett Farms reportedly gives you Spruceloft Triune Doreen. She's been a problem breeder, hasn't settled in years. But you see something in her conformation, in her potential. You adjust her nutrition, change her housing, reduce her stress. Months later, Doreen calves successfully. She classifies excellent at her next scoring. Her daughters also go excellent. When Claude visits your barn and sees what you've accomplished, he's amazed at the transformation. You want to explain that it's not one thing, it's everything. The feed mixed precisely, the stall bedded a specific way, the calm environment you maintain, the way you speak to them in Japanese, the same low tones your grandfather used with cattle. But your English isn't sufficient for such philosophy, so you just smile and shrug. By 1975, your reputation has spread beyond Ontario. You receive calls through translators. Japanese organizations want Canadian genetics. They've heard about a Japanese man in Canada who understands both markets. Can you help? This is what you've been building toward without fully knowing it. You understand what Japanese buyers want, not just high indexes or show winners, but cattle with specific qualities that will work in Japan's intensive management systems. Moderate size, good feet and legs for concrete, efficient feed conversion. Your first major shipments to Japan bring significant profits, more than you made in your first years combined. But already you're seeing further ahead. Brazil, Australia, Mexico. The world wants Canadian Holstein genetics, and you're positioned perfectly to provide them. You incorporate as Nipponia Livestock Exports. The name is important. Nipponia is the Latin name for the Japanese crested ibis, a bird that was once common but is now nearly extinct. You're thinking about heritage, about preservation, about building something that will outlast you. What you don't see yet, focused on your breeding charts and export documents, is that success in agriculture is like walking on ice. It looks solid, supports your weight, carries you forward, but underneath, currents are moving, cracks are forming, and when it breaks all at once. You're reading The Ontario Farmer at your kitchen table in 1975. The headlines tell a story of transformation and risk. Japanese investment in Canadian agriculture reaches record high. Brazilian delegation tours Ontario farms. Holstein exports drive provincial agricultural growth. But there are other stories buried in the back pages. 3 more farms lost to foreclosure in Wellington County. Veterinary malpractice suits face uphill battle. Rising interest rates squeeze dairy margins. The registered Holstein business in the mid-1970s is experiencing unprecedented growth. You attend the Royal Winter Fair and watch single cows sell for astronomical sums, some verified at tens of thousands, others rumored to reach six figures. Not for milk production. Many of these animals never produce enough milk to pay for their feed, but for their genetics, their potential, their papers. Japanese buyers arrive with significant capital. They don't always haggle. They identify what they want and pay what's necessary. The Brazilians are more strategic, forming partnerships with Canadian breeders, learning the business before making major investments. You're part of this boom, but you also see its fragility. At regional fairs, you watch farmers you know bid beyond their means on heifers they can't afford, certain they can resell to international buyers for double. When borders temporarily close due to disease scares or trade disputes, you see their farm equipment at auction sales months later. The veterinary situation in Ontario agriculture is complex. The error in judgment legal doctrine, established in Canadian law, creates significant challenges for farmers seeking recourse for veterinary mistakes. As long as a veterinarian can demonstrate they made a reasonable decision under the circumstances, liability is limited. You hear accounts in the barn, veterinarians arriving unprepared, mistakes that cost farmers valuable genetics. But successful legal action is rare. The legal precedents favor professional judgment, even when outcomes are catastrophic. The global agricultural trade in the late 1970s is transforming rapidly. The European Economic Community is subsidizing dairy production, affecting world markets. The United States is using agricultural exports as diplomatic leverage, restricting shipments based on political considerations. New diseases are emerging and spreading through global trade. John's disease, once rare in Canada, is appearing more frequently. Bovine leukosis spreads through various vectors. The more connected the global cattle trade becomes, the more vulnerable everyone becomes to distant problems. You're reading about a new disease in England called bovine spongiform encephalopathy, BSE, though most call it mad cow disease. It seems like a distant problem, something that couldn't affect North America. The disease is linked to feeding practices, specifically feeding rendered animal products back to cattle, a practice that exists in various forms across the industry. By 1980, interest rates in Canada reach unprecedented levels, approaching 20% and higher. You calculate what that means for a farmer carrying $200,000 in debt, $40,000 a year just in interest, before paying back any principal. That's more than many dairy operations gross in a year. The farms that survive are the ones that adapted early, diversified, built export markets, kept debt manageable. But for every success story, there are multiple failures that don't make headlines. The auction notices in the farm papers tell the real story. Farm sales every week, all year long. Immigration patterns are shifting too. The point system now favors educated English-speaking immigrants. The kind of agricultural workers who built Ontario's farming sector. People arriving with strong backs and specific skills but limited English face more barriers. But there are still pathways. Family reunification, investor visas, business partnerships. If you have capital, if you have family already here, if you have specialized skills, doors still open. You're thinking about this because you're thinking about the future, about succession, and that about what happens to Nipponia when you're gone. The world is speeding up, becoming more connected and more fragile simultaneously. A disease outbreak in one country affects prices globally. A political change in Brazil stops payment on contracts in Ontario. Economic shifts trigger cascades that affect bloodline values worldwide. Standing in your barn in 1985, successful beyond anything you imagined when you arrived 20 years ago, you make a decision that many will question. You're going to start building a Wagyu herd, Japanese beef cattle, the opposite of everything that's made you successful. When people ask why, you struggle to explain in your still imperfect English. But the truth is something you feel more than know, that success in agriculture isn't about riding trends, but about being ready when trends change. And they always change. You're standing in your calving pen at 3 a.m., watching a valuable bull calf struggle to breathe. He's been off feed for 2 days, running a fever you can't break. This calf represents months of planning, significant investment in breeding fees, and potentially substantial future income. The veterinarian arrives within the hour. He examines the calf, prescribes a drench, mineral oil with antibiotics, standard treatment for digestive issues. You hold the calf's head while he slides the tube down. Something goes wrong immediately. The calf starts gasping, foam coming from his nostrils. The tube has gone into the lungs instead of the stomach. Within minutes, your valuable bull calf is dead on the straw. The vet packs his equipment quickly, muttering about difficult cases, about how these things happen. He's out the door before you've fully processed what just occurred. You're in Ted Morwick's office the next morning. You want to sue. This wasn't a difficult case. It was an error, a mistake that cost you significantly. Morwick explains the legal reality through careful words. The error in judgment doctrine in Canadian law protects veterinarians when they make decisions under pressure. As long as they can claim reasonable professional judgment, liability is extremely difficult to prove. There are precedents, cases where even prominent farms couldn't win despite clear mistakes. You feel rage building in your chest, the kind that makes your vision narrow. In Japan, such errors would bring accountability. But here, the system protects the professionals, not the farmers. Lightning strikes twice. You've flushed your best donor cow to round oak rag apple elevation, one of the most sought-after bulls in the industry. 3 successful embryo transfers, 3 recipients carrying potential champion calves. Combined potential value, enormous. The first 2 calvings go perfectly, heifer calves, both exceptional, but the 3rd recipient is struggling. The calf is positioned wrong, needs to be turned or cut out. You call a veterinarian from the same practice. You're specific in your instructions, speaking carefully in your improving English. If trouble, you cut. No pulling. Cut right away. The vet arrives and starts pulling. 5 minutes pass. 10. The heifer is exhausted. The calf isn't moving. You drop the rope, step back. Cut now, you say firmly. Keep pulling, the vet insists. 20 minutes later, the calf is dead. The vet looks at his boots, packs his equipment. According to the account that would later become part of legal proceedings, when asked why he didn't perform the cesarean as instructed, his response was shocking. I forgot my knife. This time, Morwick sees a different legal angle. Forgetting essential equipment isn't an error in judgment, it's professional negligence. A veterinarian arriving unprepared for a procedure he was specifically called to perform represents a failure of basic professional standards. The case proceeds, reportedly becoming one of the first successful veterinary malpractice suits in Ontario. The precedent it sets will affect how veterinarians prepare for calls, ensuring they arrive with necessary equipment for anticipated procedures. By the 1980s, your reputation has crossed oceans. Japanese agricultural organizations are buying Canadian genetics through middlemen who mark up prices significantly. They hear about you, a Japanese man in Canada who understands both markets, who can bridge the cultural and technical gaps. The contracts start small but grow quickly. Hokkaido Livestock Improvement Association. Zen-No. Major Japanese dairy cooperatives. They want specific genetics, not just high-indexing animals, but cattle suited to Japan's intensive management systems. Brazil comes next. You're invited on a trade mission with government officials, meeting Brazilian entrepreneurs with significant capital. They're different from the Japanese buyers, more interested in volume, in transforming their entire national herd quickly. You're flying constantly now. Tokyo 1 week, São Paulo the next, back to Toronto for sales. Your English has improved dramatically through necessity, though you still prefer to let your cattle speak for you. You purchase the old Weiner farm on Highway 6, expanding from rented facilities to owned land. You incorporate as Nipponia Livestock Exports Limited, handling the increasingly complex international transactions. But while everyone watches you succeed in Holsteins, you're quietly starting something else. In a separate barn, away from the main operation, you're building a Wagyu herd, Japanese beef cattle. When people ask why, you struggle to explain. It's not about immediate profit. It's about what you sense coming. Market saturation, disease risks, the fragility of depending on one market. You're sitting at your kitchen table, watching your sons Ken and his brother finish their homework. They switch effortlessly between Japanese at home and perfect English everywhere else. They're Canadian kids who happen to have a Japanese father who built a cattle empire. Ken is the older one, more serious, already spending every spare moment in the barn. He has your eye for cattle, that instinctive understanding of animal potential. But he also has something you lack, the ability to navigate Canadian business culture, to speak the language of banks and lawyers fluently. You think about succession constantly now. In Japan, the eldest son inherits everything, continues the family business without question. But this is Canada. Your sons have choices. They could go to university, become doctors or engineers, leave farming entirely. You've never pushed them toward the cattle business, but Ken gravitates to it naturally. By high school, he's showing cattle at local fairs, winning championships. He understands not just the animals, but the theater of it, how to present them, how to catch a judge's eye. You watch Ken work and see yourself, but also something more. He can do what you never could, tell the story of the cattle, explain their value in words that Canadian buyers understand. Where you communicate through results, Ken communicates through personality, through connections. The business is changing too. It's no longer just about having good cattle. It's about marketing, branding, social connections. The registered Holstein business has become as much about relationships as genetics. Ken understands this instinctively. You have conversations with Ken about the future, mixing Japanese and English, concepts that don't quite translate between cultures. You try to explain wa, harmony, balance, and how it applies to business. Never extend too far. Never depend on one market. Always have something in reserve. Ken listens, but also challenges. He sees opportunities you're cautious about. Bigger partnerships, larger shipments, more debt to finance expansion. It's the Canadian way. Leverage everything, grow or die. You're proud of what you've built, but also fearful. You've seen too many operations destroyed by single events, a disease outbreak, a market closure, a partnership gone wrong. The higher you climb, the further you can fall. The Wagyu herd you're building, Ken doesn't fully understand it yet. To him, it seems like a distraction from the profitable Holstein business. But you're not building it for today. You're building it for a crisis you can feel coming, but can't quite name. You spend evenings teaching Ken the aspects of the business that can't be learned in barns. How to read between the lines of a contract. How to sense when a partner is becoming unreliable. How to know when to walk away from a deal, even when it looks profitable. Most importantly, you try to teach him about resilience. Not the Canadian concept of bouncing back, but the Japanese concept of bending without breaking, adapting completely if necessary, being willing to become something entirely different if survival requires it. You're Ken now, sitting in the farm office when the news breaks. A single cow in Alberta has tested positive for BSE, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, mad cow disease. The announcer's voice is carefully controlled, but you hear the underlying panic. Within hours, the borders slam shut. The United States closes immediately. Japan follows. Every country that imports Canadian beef and dairy genetics suddenly views anything from Canada as contaminated. Your phone starts ringing and doesn't stop. Brazilian buyers canceling contracts. Japanese partners expressing regret but suspending all shipments. You have $2 million worth of cattle assembled for export, eating $50 a day per head in feed, with nowhere to go. Your father is in Japan, having semi-retired to run a small ice cream shop, leaving you to manage the Canadian operation. You call him, trying to keep the panic out of your voice. His response is calm, almost serene. This is why we have Wagyu, but first, survive today. You need a plan immediately. The cattle can't just sit here burning through money. You need to generate cash flow, maintain the genetics, keep the operation alive until borders reopen. Giovanni Lucignano enters your life at exactly the wrong moment, or maybe the right one, depending on how you look at it. He's a Brazilian with Italian charm, expensive suits, and a wealthy wife backing his agricultural investments. He wants to partner. He provides capital to maintain the operation. You provide expertise and cattle. The terms aren't ideal, but you're hemorrhaging money. Every day the borders stay closed costs thousands. You sign the partnership agreement, believing it's temporary, just until BSE blows over. You develop a strategy. If you can't export cattle, make them so famous that buyers will find a way to come to you when borders reopen. You partner with Barclay Phoenix, one of the best show technicians in North America. Together, you'll dominate every major show, create such demand that geography becomes irrelevant. The 2004 show season is a triumph. At the Royal Winter Fair, you're standing in the ring with Penlo Georgette outside as she's named All-Canadian Senior 3-year-old. The crowd erupts. 8 Nipponia animals receive All-Canadian nominations. You're the toast of the Holstein world. But standing there in the spotlight, holding the banner, you can't shake the feeling that this is all theater. The glory doesn't pay bills. The trophies don't service debt. Every month, the financial pressure builds. By 2006, the debt has passed $500,000. Lucignano keeps injecting capital, but his demands grow. He wants more control, more say in breeding decisions. His wife's family money comes with strings. They want to see returns, not ribbons. You organize the Hanover Hill Legacy Sale, borrowing the prestige of that legendary farm name. It's brilliant marketing. You're not having a crisis sale, you're hosting a prestigious event. Gross receipts hit $1.35 million, but after commissions, expenses, and debt service, you're still underwater. Then Lucignano's wife files for divorce. The money tap shuts off instantly. Lucignano himself is scrambling, trying to save what he can from the marriage dissolution. Your operating capital evaporates overnight. You're in your lawyer's office, preparing for the inevitable. Complete dispersal. Everything must go. The lawyer explains your options, all of them bad. Creditors are circling. Some have made threats. Not just legal threats, but physical ones. You hire security for the sale. 6 guards, stationed at every entrance to Brubacher's. You ask Kevin Hayden, your childhood friend, to stay close during the sale. Not as a buyer, but as protection. The night before the sale, you move the most valuable animals to a separate location. They'll be trucked in at the last minute, minimizing the chance for creditors to interfere. You're playing chess while everyone else thinks it's checkers. The morning of the sale, you're standing in the barn at 4 a.m., alone with the cattle one last time. Penlo Georgette outside stands in her stall, magnificent even now. She's classified EX96, one of the highest scores ever given. All-Canadian Senior 3-year-old in 2004, All-Canadian Mature Cow in 2007. She represents everything your father built, everything you tried to continue. You run your hand along her back, the way your father taught you. You can feel her quality, her potential still untapped. She should be founding a dynasty, not ending one. The sale is surreal. You're standing there watching your life's work parade through the ring. Lot after lot, bloodlines your father developed over 40 years, dispersing to the 4 winds. Lucignano appears, trying to buy back Georgette and her daughter. Your lawyer intercepts. There are liens on those animals. The confrontation gets heated. Lucignano storms out, gets in his limousine, leaves forever. When Georgette sells, you feel something break inside you. Not your spirit, something else. Maybe it's acceptance. Maybe it's relief. The empire is gone. Total proceeds, $250,000. After auction costs, legal fees, and paying the most aggressive creditors, you're left with $53,000. 40 years of building, decades of genetics, a lifetime of expertise, reduced to what a new pickup truck costs. That evening, you're in the empty barn. The silence is deafening. No cattle lowing, no machinery humming, just empty stalls and memories. Kevin Hayden finds you there. He doesn't say much, doesn't need to. He's been there through it all, the showing days, the glory, the collapse, now the ending. What now? He finally asks. You think about your father's Wagyu herd still intact, separate from the Holstein disaster. You think about his words, be willing to become something entirely different if survival requires it. You're standing in a different barn now. Same farm in Puslinch, but everything else has changed. Instead of 50 Holstein dairy cows, you have 12 Wagyu cattle. Instead of bulk tanks and milking equipment, you have carefully controlled feeding programs and meticulous record-keeping. The math is completely different. A Holstein might produce $2,000 in milk per year. A single Wagyu carcass, properly raised and marketed, can bring $10,000 or more. Low volume, high value. The opposite of everything you knew. You spend 4 years in Japan, learning from masters who've raised Wagyu for generations. It's not just about genetics, it's about a philosophy. The feeding program that takes 30 months instead of 18. The stress-free environment. The attention to marbling that borders on obsession. Kevin Hayden becomes your partner. The same friend who stood guard during the dispersal now helps build something new. He handles the business side while you focus on the cattle. It's a partnership built on trust earned through crisis. The market development is slow, deliberate. You can't compete with commodity beef. You don't try. Instead, you tell a story about heritage, craftsmanship, the Japanese attention to detail applied in Canadian conditions. High-end restaurants in Toronto start calling. They want consistency, exclusivity, story. You provide all three. The chef at a Yorkville steakhouse tells you your beef changed how he thinks about his menu. Instead of offering dozens of cuts, he features 3, all from your farm, each with its own story. The pricing seems insane to anyone from the commodity world. Some cuts reach $100 per pound retail, sometimes more. But you're not selling meat, you're selling an experience, a philosophy, a connection to something authentic in an increasingly artificial world. Customers start arriving at the farm, wanting to see where their food comes from. Japanese businessmen fly in specifically to taste authentic Wagyu raised outside Japan. Food writers begin featuring your story, not as a tale of failure, but of transformation. You think often about the Holstein Empire, about what was lost, but also about what was preserved. The knowledge, the work ethic, the ability to read an animal. These things survived the bankruptcy, traveled from one species to another. Your father, now in his 80s, visits from Japan. He walks through the Wagyu barn slowly, examining each animal with the same intensity he once applied to Holsteins. He nods, says little, but you see approval in his eyes. More importantly, you see validation of his foresight, building the escape route before the crisis, not after. You're back to being yourself now, standing in a dairy barn in 2025, thinking about the Kurosawatsu story. The parallels to today are impossible to ignore. Consolidation is accelerating. Farms that milked 100 cows now milk 1,000 or go under. Environmental regulations get stricter every year. Consumer preferences shift faster than anyone can adapt. The same forces that destroyed Nipponia Holsteins are at work today, just with different names. The partnership dynamics between Ken and Lucignano, you see them playing out everywhere. Outside investors promising capital, demanding control. Dairy farmers desperate for cash flow signing agreements they don't fully understand. The pattern repeats. It works until it doesn't, and when it doesn't, the farmer loses everything. The BSE crisis of 2003 has faded from memory, but new crises keep coming. COVID-19 shut down processing plants. Avian influenza threatens to jump species. Climate volatility destroys feed crops. Each crisis follows the same pattern: sudden closure of markets, desperate scrambling for alternatives, operations that seemed solid crumbling overnight. Ken Kurosawatsu now speaks at agricultural conferences, sharing lessons learned. His message is consistent. Diversification isn't about having multiple revenue streams in the same industry. It's about building something that operates on completely different principles from your main business. The Wagyu operation thrives precisely because it's everything the Holstein business wasn't. Where Holsteins were about volume, Wagyu is about scarcity. Where Holsteins depended on export markets, Wagyu serves local premium buyers. Where Holsteins required massive infrastructure, Wagyu needs minimal facilities. Agricultural educators study the Nipponia case as a textbook example of both success and failure. The breeding program that produced 3 all-Canadian bulls from 1 cow demonstrates the value of expertise and patience. The collapse shows how external shocks can destroy even excellent operations. But the real lesson, the one that keeps you awake at night, is about timing. Yukio built his Wagyu herd in the 1990s, when the Holstein business was booming. He created his escape route when he didn't need it. By the time Ken needed it, it was ready. How many current dairy operations have their escape route planned? How many are building their opposite model while their primary business still functions? The answer, you know from talking to producers across the country, is almost none. You're back in your own barn, 5 a.m., October 2025. The morning routine is identical to what it was in 1968. Cows need milking, regardless of market conditions or global crises. But everything else has changed. Your phone buzzes with overnight market reports, milk futures down, feed costs up, another processor announcing closure. The margins that were tight are now non-existent. You're doing everything right. Efficient production, quality premiums, cost control, and still barely surviving. You think about the Kurosawatsu story, about Yukio arriving in Canada, unable to speak English but able to read cattle, about building an empire from nothing, about losing it all, about building something entirely different from the ashes. The question that haunts you is simple. What's your Wagyu? What opposite model are you building while your main operation still functions? Because the lesson of Nipponia isn't about Holsteins or Wagyu, it's about recognizing that what makes you successful today might be what destroys you tomorrow. You finish morning milking, step outside into the dawn light. Another day in dairy, but with new understanding. The game isn't about doing what you do better than everyone else. It's about being ready to do something completely different when the world changes. And the world always changes. The Nipponia story isn't really about the past. It's about your future. About decisions you'll make in the next 6 months that will determine whether you're still farming in 5 years. About building your escape route now while you still can, not when you need it. Because when you need it, when your BSE moment arrives, when your partnership fails, when your market disappears, it's already too late. The only question that matters is this. When your moment comes, and it will come, will you be ready?
And there you have it. The Nipponia story. From Holstein empire to complete collapse to Wagyu redemption. But this isn't really about Holsteins or Wagyu, is it? It's about recognizing when the game has changed. It's about building your escape route while you're still winning, not when you're desperate. It's about understanding that expertise trumps capital, that adaptability beats stubbornness, and that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find something better. If this story resonated with you, and I suspect it did, take a moment to think about your own operation. What's your opposite model? What are you building that operates on completely different principles from your main business? Because as Yukio Kurosawatsu proved, the time to build your lifeboat is before the ship starts sinking. Thank you for joining us for this special, long-form episode of the Bullvine podcast. If you found value in this story, please share it with another dairy producer who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the Bullvine podcast wherever you get your podcasts and visit us at www.thebullvine.com for daily news, analysis, and insights for progressive dairy producers. Remember, every article, every podcast, every piece of content we create is designed with one goal, helping you navigate the challenges and opportunities in modern dairy farming. I want to leave you with this thought. Ken Kurosawatsu stood in Brubacher's auction barn in 2009 watching everything disappear. Today, he's selling Wagyu beef for over $100 per pound. Not because he rebuilt what was lost, but because he built something entirely different. The question isn't whether you'll face your BSE moment, your partnership crisis, your market collapse. The question is, will you be ready when it comes? Until next time, this has been the Bullvine Podcast. Keep breeding better cattle and building better futures. Stay strong, stay smart, and never stop adapting.